Schaller here, and I am showing you my virtual poster of what I learned about online teaching to finish up our last module of our class, and there's a picture of me there. And so just so you have an understanding of what you're about to get into here, this is my virtual poster, and I did it in Mural because I had done this for Module 4, and I already kind of had a feel for it, and I knew I was going to have a lot of information. So this is going to be part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. And here are the sources that I utilized. You see some dots around here. I'll explain what that is soon. I am also giving you the link to this, which should be the visitor link, which should be view only. Hopefully that's actually the case based on the setting that I put it at. And I also downloaded this as a PDF, but I believe the PDF will expire in a few days. I'm going to try and do this in 15 minutes because I'm using Screencast-O-Matic, but I have a feeling it might be longer than this, but I'm definitely going to say some things that you will not get from just looking at the link or by looking at the PDF. Which I should be able to share with you on the discussion board. So hopefully this is going to be helpful because I know that there's quite a mind map going on here of the way that my brain put this information together. So let me take you through a journey here. So here we have in the middle here in kind of grayed out is my philosophy of online teaching and learning. And then this section down here is a little more pandemic specific. These are the standards that I pulled from, and I realize now I pulled from quite a bit, the National Standards for Quality Online Teaching, and from the Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance. And I kind of color-coded them, but you know, if you're colorblind, it's okay. You don't necessarily have to go by the color, and you can see that they're listed in the different categories. And then I drew a bunch of arrows to show you which idea they go to, and I also did the circle, which shows you the letter and number, so you can see which category it is. And then over here, I have pulled some concepts from the Kozlowski and Carver reading, which was in our module, our last reading that we had, and how that ties in as well to some of these ideas. So I'm kind of struggling here as to the size to show it at. So one of the first thing was that really stuck out to me is staying ahead and constantly having to evolve and learn all of this technology and stay ahead in the best interest of serving the kids. And you know what technology is going to be best, because each piece of technology has its own quirks. There's few that are perfect and that really satisfy all these millions of little needs that us teachers and the students have. So I put that on there, and it ties in really well, I think, with A3. Maximizing science, exploration, and experimentation. I am a science teacher, and I think this ties in with discipline-specific technology. So I've used virtual labs and such. Number 3, introduce as much variety as possible to meet as many needs as possible. So trying not to just do the same thing all the time for the kids. Simulations and games, this was brought up in the Kozlowski reading. And I think this was pretty important because recently with my students in my environmental science class, we're talking right now about genetically modified crops, GMOs. And one of the simulations that we're looking at is taking, you know, quote unquote genetically modified corn and watching it grow for 30 years. We can't do that with any kind of hands-on experimentation. Or maybe I wanted to look at the effect of some pollution on an entire ocean or something like that. And you can only do that with some of these online simulations. It's not possible to do it in person. So that's where that can really benefit. And for that, I pulled from digital pedagogy, diverse instruction, and I believe the last one is instructional design. Aim for learner-directed structure so that students have opportunities to learn from each other and develop a social presence. So I like this idea because it accomplishes so much in one statement. The students are developing a community and they're learning from each other, and you're getting farther away from a teacher-centered model. And I've been doing this a lot lately. My students are debating GMOs right now, and I just let them have the class to debate and let them shape the outcome based on their research and their ideas. And it was very satisfying to do that. And they got much closer with each other as a result. So case studies would be another example of this. And let's move on. I'm not necessarily going to read everything or we'll be here all night. Number 5, provide frequent communication, feedback, and formative assessment. I feel that this is absolutely essential. You can see I have an arrow pointed to this, and it's pretty much this teacher support from this latest reading, the Kozlowski reading, regular feedback, keeping in touch constantly with the students, although within reason. You still have to take care of yourself, but I feel that I'm doing this way more. And, even I don't normally say you're welcome that much to students, but I'll respond to a student's question via email, and then they'll reply back, thank you. And then I reply back, you're welcome, which I wouldn't normally do, but I feel that it's necessary to keep that positive thread of communication going. So absolutely for number 5. Number 6, differentiating instruction as much as possible. So trying to meet everyone's needs. Monitor and interpret. You can see I pulled here from F1, which comes from diverse instruction. So it makes sense that it would fit here, as well as G7, personalize the learning experience based on performance and assessment data. It's a tricky one, but something I think that asynchronous online learning, we can kind of do this a little more easily because we kind of have a little more time to accommodate different learners and meet individual needs. Sometimes I don't have time for that live. Don't have as much time for that live. Help develop a community of teachers and staff. I've been working on this a lot. I've been working much more with co-teachers because we're all in the building together still. And I'm meeting with a lot of other teachers and the guidance counselors way more than before, and parents too. I've been reaching out to them a lot. So I feel that behind the scenes, I'm working much more, and I think that this is necessary, like the idea, it takes a village. How do I embody this during the pandemic? This one is pretty big, and I noticed that in the Kozlowski reading, this was considered helping kids become independent, and they must. And that, I agree, this is absolutely the key to online learning being a success. And as you can see, I pulled from some of these standards here. By being constantly flexible. This is a little exhausting, but I'm constantly asking the students just quickly when I see them, like, how are you guys doing? How did you feel about this? Tell me what's going on in your mind. And trying to implement more surveys. And I did surveys at the beginning of the year and actually was pleasantly surprised with the results, which caused me to relax more. So I kind of get direct feedback, and it has to be specific, because if I just give a survey to the kids and I say, hey, how's class going? And they're like, fine. And, I want more specific information than that. This last piece, I ended up pulling a lot from by making up for the loss of hands-on and naturally various face-to-face classroom activities. So what are ways that I feel that online learning has to step up for students like mine who are not used to it? So I wanted to make that distinction clear. They didn't sign up for online learning. They actually signed up for hands-on learning because I work at a career and technical school. So this is something that feels like quite a loss for my students because that specifically is what they were not aiming for when the pandemic began. Giving students roles when working with each other, making them responsible for each other's learning. We could use Flipgrid videos to peer review. I'm having students create models of different aquatic ecosystems, and they're going to review each other's aquatic ecosystems. That kind of ties into keeping in touch. Well thought out responses. This is a big one right here because, when I reply to a student and, they could easily misread and there's a miscommunication if they misinterpret the tone, or they sense something that I'm writing and they wouldn't normally because the nonverbal communication isn't there. So we kind of have to step that up a little bit. Okay, let's move on. And you'll see there's a dotted arrow. I'll explain that in a second. So next we're going to move on to how can we meet SEL needs. So this section you can see is grayed out here. Let's zero in on the social presence model. And I'm going to move to my move mode. So here we have the social presence model from Dickers. We have the effective association, community cohesion, instructor involvement, interaction intensity, and knowledge and experience. What I did was I pulled from the reading some things that I felt support these strongly, and then I added a little post-it note. Some say A, some say S. The A stands for asynchronous, the S stands for synchronous. So I put an A next to a note, a sticky note, if I felt that it was, I don't know, maybe a little stronger in asynchronous use or a little stronger in synchronous use. And if I really couldn't decide because they apply both so well, I put both next to them. Now, for effective association, I agree with using personal relevance. I think if you can make the topic very personal relevant to the student and they feel an emotional connection through the content, I feel that might be one of the best effective associations after all, especially if you work to make it very explicit. Say, I'm trying to get you to connect to this. How does this relate to your life? Then I think that might be the strongest way. I know it's not the only way. For instance, I learned a lot from the SEL check-ins that you can use at the start of class. And the discussion, I made a comment that you could do it at the end of class too, to really get a feel for how the students are feeling. And I really like that video that was provided. Here we are, community cohesion, making students work visible. So having the students create projects and then have students look at each other's projects. We've done that in this class. Peer feedback, I think, is a powerful tool, and really encourage the kids to, you're helping each other. And create that support. So they have to start leaning on each other and carefully managing discussion boards. I felt that figuring out how to get the kids to really interact with each other more. Instructor involvement, being as involved as possible, I think almost goes without saying. I think it's important to have it go the other direction. So like I was saying earlier, surveying the kids, getting them to tell you how they think things are going in your class. I also really like the feedback burger, and I've heard this before. This was from the Graham chapter on when you give students feedback, you don't want to just give them negative or cold feedback. You want to tell them some positive things as well. Make sure that you're building relationship, and that's part of the bun. And then the meat is the part where, okay, this is what you need to fix, but then you're adding supportive comments throughout. So I thought that was helpful advice. Interaction intensity, again, peers working together, making them accountable for each other's learning. And here, knowledge and experience, I was impressed with one of the Graham chapters. There was a lot about how you specifically word the prompts to really get those different layers of meaning from the students. I added carefully managed discussion boards again. And I think that that Dickers study that we read with the social presence model had a lot of really good ideas, including giving students roles and a lot of pre-assessments. I've definitely been doing a lot of pre-assessments to try to help me gauge how to guide the students. Then you'll see I have this thing here. This was getting back to this concept of, what's the role of synchronous and what's the role of asynchronous in supporting social and emotional needs. And I know this seems like a technical answer, but I think that this sort of is at the heart of it all, that the activities should be integrated in such a way that the online activities support the in-person activities and vice versa. And in this reading, I believe this was from Module 6, as we read about the different blended learning models, it was a lot of you shouldn't have these islands, right? So like the kids are doing work at home or online and have it be completely unrelated and unconnected to the in-person portions of the class. And they should really be a link. One should reinforce the other. And I thought this when I started teaching this online this year, but I wasn't confident in it. I wasn't sure how to do it. It's tricky because of students, being absent, and I'll talk more about it later, but I thought that this was relevant, and I also think this ties in with adapting online instruction for the pandemic. So this concludes part 1, and I'm going to do a part 2 video